Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to my top 10 favorite SCPs. And just as a heads up, my favorite type of SCP is the exploration one, so there's going to be a lot of them in this list, just so you know. So without further ado, number 10, SCP-050, To the Cleverest. This SCP is a small monkey statue with the words "To the Cleverest" written on the label of it. And the properties of this SCP are it will clean spotlessly any room it's in, but will also leave tiny traps or pranks around. Now that alone would not get it on this list, but my favorite part about it is that the people who were really into the early Foundation, the ones like Dr. Bright who made themselves into characters, they got together and had a series of fictional pranks against each other. And I just really enjoy that. I think that's a cool little experience and history of the SCP Foundation. Number 9. SCP-2006, Too Spooky. It is a sentient creature that can transform into anything. There is no limit to its transformation abilities. And its goal is to scare people, just scare them. And the Foundation, I found it early, I'm guessing, because they have it like watching really cheesy horror movies and like they're pretending that they're terrified of that. And one of the things that really solidified this on this list is at the end there's a note from one of the directors, and they're talking about he's disciplining them because they're like laughing and making fun of it. And he's like, if this thing ever gets out and learns what people truly fear, like war and poverty, you will not be laughing. So cut it out. And I thought that was really cool because like cater entities they don't always have to be like these really destructive forces. They can sometimes be controlled things that have the potential to be extremely dangerous. Number 8, SCP-1689, Bag of Holding Potatoes. Now this SCP is a bag of infinite potatoes. Like they found it in a village who were using it as their only food source for just like a century and had no contact with the outside world because they could just live off this one thing. And they sent an exploration team into it. And it's really funny. It's kind of not taken too seriously. The exploration log is written from the perspective of the team leader, who's super like casual and like sarcastic, and it's just really fun to read. Number 7, SCP-087, The Stairwell. Now, if you're familiar with the Foundation, you're familiar with the Stairwell. It is a classic. And the reason it's one of my favorites is because while it didn't get me into the Foundation, it was the one that kept me in it. And I think this one is where my love of the exploration logs come from. And I don't really need to say any more about this one. You all know what it is. Number 6, SCP-455, The Cargo Ship. Now this is another exploration log, and the cargo ship is really old and rusted, and so they send a team in, and there are several teams of it. First, there's like they've tried different exploration methods with unmanned and manned. It's really interesting. Like for one example, they send a guy through the main hull, like straight down into the ship, where you get the big cargo containers out from the middle of the ship, you take them out, and then they send a team down the stairs, and when they meet up, they're in like different places, so there's kind of like a dimensional rift. It's a really dark and captivating story. Number 5, SCP-2639, Video Game Violence. Now this SCP has a very unique way it's written. It's written like an in-game text from the game Quake. And these kids who were playing Quake are contacted by the scientist who works for the Foundation. And he tells them that they've been trapped in the game for 10 years. And that the monsters they're killing to get ammo and stuff to shoot the other players are actual people. The game is like dimensional rifts somehow, and they're like transported to area and they can just wreak havoc. And it's really a bombshell to drop on them, and it's something truly great comes out of it, and it's definitely one you should check out. Number 4, SCP-1733, Season Opener. Now this SCP is a videotape of a game between two baseball teams, and the person who recorded it noticed there was a foul, and he brought it up on the internet, and people said, no, that's not what happened. And he showed them the video, and it's really confusing for them because that's not what happened. So the Foundation gets a hold of it, and they played for a few times, and every time they notice the people gain a little more memory of the past events. Like at first, they don't seem to notice it, and then it feels like deja vu, and then it devolves into chaos once that people realize I'm not the only one who experiences this. Everyone's experiencing this. Something is wrong. We need to do something. They try to escape. They can't, and they just try everything possible because they keep reliving this over and over, and they're trying to escape. And cults form, and they sacrifice people, and they're just doing anything they can possibly think of. And the Foundation stops playing it because not even they could handle like the torment they were putting these people through. Number 3, SCP-610, The Flesh That Hates. Now, this SCP probably has the greatest picture on the Foundation site. It is absolutely disturbing to look at. And what it is this fungus that showed up in Russia, and the Foundation's called in, and it's an exploration log, and they're called in and they explore like the area, and they go through these tunnels and they try to find the source of it. And it's very well written, and it has a lot of detail to it. And out of the exploration blogs that I've read, it is the best. Now, as we get into the top 2, I just want to mention, when I came up with this list, I only knew the position of 2 SCPs, number 1 and number 2, because number 2 used to be my favorite. And these, not only are they my favorite, I also consider them to be the best SCPs. Now, you can argue the other 8, like, I don't really care, like, everyone's got an opinion, but you're going to be hard-pressed to convince me these 2 are not the best. Now, when I was looking at these 2, seeing what I had connected, what made these better than all the others, and I came up with 3 things, 3 categories. Number 1, a great SCP. That one's pretty self-explanatory, is why that one's important. Number 2, it has to have some sort of mystery to it. Now, I consider that very important because the redacted parts of the SCP articles are what set them apart from just other stories. You're not just describing a magical fantasy box or something. You're describing it from the point of people who do not fully understand it, and also from the perspective of a secret organization with a hierarchy. And to add to this lore, you have to have like some restricted access. It adds to the mystery of it and makes it an SCP article and not just something someone wrote that just happened to involve a mythical object or creature. And number 1, it has to involve the Foundation in some way. Now this one has a lot to do with number 2 as to why it's important. You can have a great story, but for it to be a great SCP, it needs to involve the lore. It needs to be a part of this collective of 5,000 other SCPs. Because without that, you couldn't have SCPs like 914 or the Omega-7 Task Force, because they wouldn't connect. They'd just be a random assortment of whatever people thought up. But because they are connected through this organization, the Foundation, they can be greater than the sum of their parts. Number 2, SCP-507, Reluctant Dimension Hopper. Now this one is all over the place on terms of its tone. It starts off with describing how 507 makes whoever he meets give him a nickname. He answers to Tommy, Steve, Bruto, Houdini, and Grabnock the Destroyer. And that's to really set the tone of this article as being funny, but it is very much not. He's a regular human, except for the fact that he's afflicted with a terrible ability to where he's forced to shift to a different dimension. And this could happen at any time. And the places that he goes are not great. They're pretty bad. And what's interesting is he goes to one good place. And if you gotta read the article to hear about that, it just brings home the fact that this guy is suffering. And that fulfills number 1 of the checklist. As for number 2, his ability teleports into a different dimension. Like, he's never at the same place twice, except for one dimension, which he goes to 3 or 4 times in the article. And each time you learn a little bit more about it. And it ends still leaving you wondering how it connects, because this is clearly a very important part to the story and how it connects to his power. And it just wants you to come back and look over it again and see if you missed something. And as for number 3, there is an incident where another version of him gets transported to his dimension. And so there are 2 of them in that reality, momentarily, until he gets transported back. So the Foundation scientists come in and they're like, which one of you is ours? And then they give it a moment and they look at each other and then they answer, we're not going to tell you. And they're like, why? And their response is just perfect. Because you consider the other one expendable. And the person who wrote this truly understood what the Foundation was. A necessary evil. And I won't spoil how the encounter ends. It's super great. This is one you definitely have to read. And now on to number 1. My favorite SCP and what I consider the best SCP of all time. Number 1. SCP-2085. The Black Rabbit Company. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this one, you're probably going to be like, hey, why isn't the one I love on this list? Or why wasn't it number 1? And for those of you who have read this one, you're like, yeah, I knew it was going to be number 1. The Black Rabbit Company is made up of 6 people. One man who's extremely augmented with robotic arms and hands and everything, and has this weird, mysterious thing in his chest that powers him, that's corrupting him and trying to take over him. And his character is just perfection. Like, you could not write a better character. He's up with Vash the Stampede in terms of characters. And the other 5 people are 5 augmented cat women. Now follow me here. They're all sisters, and they set up this group where they work as mercenaries to fight evil, fight crime, and they try to do good in the world. And they meet up with the wizard, who's the augmented man. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. And they write out this charter where they plan to join forces and just fight the evil, corrupt world they were born into. And it's just absolutely beautiful. It was the only SCP that has ever moved me. And if you can take a research document format that all SCP articles are supposed to have and make that moving, that is an incredible accomplishment. Like, I've read stories about like horrible SCPs, you know, the ones where you have to sacrifice people to them or do horrible things to people. But the way those are written, you don't feel anything towards the people other than, oh, that's a terrible thing that's happening. Okay, moving on with my life. I'm gonna read my next SCP. But with this one, I just couldn't read anymore. I just had to stop and think about this story for the rest of the day. I mean, it was moving. It was inspirational, and it's one you just have to read. Not even if you're not in the SCP, into the SCP Foundation, you're just on this video for some weird reason. It is amazing. No, not only amazing, it is perfection. There will never be an SCP that surpasses this one. So that's my top 10 favorite SCPs. Now the purpose of this was to share some SCPs you might not have heard of, ones that I enjoyed that I think you would enjoy too. And so in the comment section, feel free to share what you think is your favorite. I mean, you can list 1, you can list 10, list 100. Well, don't do that. I'd never be able to get through them. Just list your favorites and I'll check them out. I probably have seen them. There were a lot of honorable mentions on this list. I might make a second video of just my top 10 honorable mentions or something like that, because there are just so many great SCPs out there. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for sticking to the end, and have a good day.